Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. A couple of days ago, I opened up my Instagram story for you guys to ask questions directly, and I'll be answering a few of those today. Sorry for the very messy background and my wet hair. I had to film this during like a quick study break. So, one viewer asked, how important are summer internships or other activities when applying to law school? It does depend on the law school, and obviously I don't work on the admissions side, or on any side, I don't work for the law school, and only an admissions officer can really truly know how much weight they put on each factor. But I will say that law school entrance is a competitive process, and a lot of the applicants to top law schools already have great LSAT scores and strong grades from a fairly good school. Your summer internships are an opportunity for you to expand the vision of yourself that the admissions officer is facing. It tells a story about your identity and your interests outside of your stats, like your LSAT score. And while I wouldn't say that, law schools place a ton of weight on like the prestige of your internships or that kind of thing, they do care about whether or not you try to gain other skills or experiences during that time. So I would say that you should put some thought into how to work your summer internships or other experiences into your narrative of yourself when you're applying to law school. So like if you're someone who cares about like health policy and you've done an internship in that area, obviously it's an easy way to transition that into talking about how you want to use that experience one way or the other in your future law career as well. Another viewer asked, how long did you study for the LSAT, and did you pay for classes or were you self-taught? I did not choose to take a class. I have talked about this in another video, how I studied for the LSAT, so definitely check that out if you're looking for an in-depth breakdown of the LSAT and how I approached it. But for this question, I chose not to take a class because I think, having worked in the LSAT prep industry, the main benefit of a class is that it keeps you accountable and keeps you on track for a study schedule, and I felt confident that I could do that. That being said, I think taking a class can be helpful if you have the resources to do so, but you can certainly do well in the LSAT without shelling out for a class as well. It's not make or break one way or the other. How long did I study for the LSAT? I studied on and off for a few months before taking it the first time, and then there were a few months in between taking it the first time and the second time. But I wasn't studying like full time or anything like that. Another viewer asked, is there a limit to the number of LSATs you can take? I also addressed this in my LSAT video, but I'll just say really quickly that there isn't, well actually I'm not sure if the LSAC, which is the organization that, administers the LSAT, if they have a strict limit on how many times you can take the test, but in general, I would say you should limit yourself to 2, because law schools don't really like to see you just sort of throwing yourself at the test over and over. From what I've heard in talking to other people, 2 is kind of the limit, and after that, if you take it 3 times and you don't show a lot of improvement, for example, law schools will kind of question like why you're doing that or what the point of it is. One viewer asked a really good question. Law school can take a toll on relationships, they wrote. How have you managed balancing both? This is an interesting and tough question to answer because, of course, everyone handles their own relationships differently, and it really depends on your partner. But for me personally, I came to law school with a partner of, I think at the time it was our 8th year together, so we had a really strong foundation going in. And now, of course, he's my husband. We got married last month. But that's not to say that it was always easy to balance the relationship and the demands of law school, because especially the first quarter of the first year, I was working an insane amount of hours just studying, and I wasn't in a good place mentally because it was just so crushing of a burden. Thankfully, we kind of talked about it beforehand, and he knew, based on my expectations of law school, that the first year or so would be the toughest of the 3 years. And so we were really upfront about that. We managed our expectations of each other, and I tried really hard to set aside time every week for just the 2 of us to reconnect and do something fun together. I think in any partnership, if the 2 of you both have strong career aspirations, there are going to be times when one person's career kind of takes precedence over the other. And so if you're in what you feel to be a long-term relationship with someone who is equally as ambitious as you, I would say talking about potential different paths you could take and trying to map out as best you can the times at which your career or his or her career is going to take precedence would, kind of help, again, manage those expectations and help each partner in the relationship feel like they're being heard and respected and taken into account. I think it's also helpful to try to integrate your partner into your life at the law school to the extent that that's possible and to the extent that your partner is interested in that. I mean, my husband knows quite a few of my law school friends. We have dinner together occasionally, and I tell him like a lot of like law school goss and like that kind of thing. So he both feels integrated into my life at the law school, but also feels like he can provide like an outlet for me outside of that, which I think is like a healthy balance. Good question. And I'm still figuring it out, obviously. Another viewer asked, what is your study schedule like and how far in advance do you read for each class? My study schedule varies quarter by quarter because I have different commitments, like different levels of different amounts of class or, clinic. Those have different scheduling requirements. But in general, when I'm taking a full just classroom load, I tend to do a lot of reading over the weekend for basically the front half of the week. But I try not to read too far in advance, partly because my brain just doesn't work that way. I can't hold a huge volume of information at a very high level of detail in my head. And so I don't like to do, all the reading for the week of class like some people like to do. That just doesn't work for me personally and my learning style. But I also think that doing that can be sometimes quite inefficient because the readings don't always direct you to the things that the professor will think is most important, for example. So, you may spend a ton of time going down one path in the reading only to find that your class is going to emphasize something slightly different or maybe explain things to you in a way that helps you understand the reading that is coming up for the rest of the week. I also have a video about how to read in law school if you guys want to hear a little bit more in depth about that. Oh, but what is my study schedule like? I like to block out large chunks of time. I find that I can't get a lot done if I have like a stray half hour, 45 minutes here or there. I really need to immerse myself for a large chunk of time. So that's what I try to do is like block out my schedule in these chunks. Another viewer asked, what are the typical undergrad degrees in law school and which degrees would you recommend? So the typical undergrad degrees in law school that I've seen tend to be like political science or other humanities-based majors. On the other hand, I would say that law school doesn't require you to have a typical degree, and in fact, many of the people that do best in law school seem to have a different background that, while it did emphasize writing and analytical thinking, gives them a different perspective on the legal issues. So, I have friends who studied neuroscience, biology, engineering. I myself studied English literature. There are a lot of different ways that you can go, and I actually can't think of an undergrad major that I would say is like wrong for law school. I mean, the point of being a lawyer is that you have skills that you can bring to bear on many subject areas. Now, for which degrees I would recommend for law school, again, I think you should just go with your own personal interests because a lot of things can change when it comes to your interest and your career goals between college and law school. I always recommend considering taking a year off at least because I find that you become a more interesting and well-rounded law student and lawyer if you have some time away from school to kind of develop your career interests, your skills, and your goals outside of that. I would say that any degree that teaches you to read carefully and thoughtfully is a useful one for law school, and similarly, any degree that makes you write analytically, meaning writing that helps you synthesize complex ideas, that sort of writing skill will be very helpful in law school as well. So if you have a major that does both of those, I think you'll be well set for law school. What are ways to find which practice area you want to go into? This is a question that I struggle with a lot because I'm the first lawyer in my family. So it's not like I have a parent or an uncle or whomever that I can ask about what it's like to actually be a practicing lawyer day to day. And I think the practice areas thing, it's kind of hard to figure it out from the outside because practice areas they can be so esoteric and, it's just not really common knowledge. I would say the ways that I've tried to go about it has been mainly to talk to other lawyers around me, so like through my summer job, go out to coffee with, some of the attorneys in the office to ask them not only about what they do in the current job that we were working, but what they had done previously at, law firms or in other public interest jobs, kind of how they approached figuring out what practice area they were interested in. I mean, sometimes you'll like take a certain class, like you'll take IP law or something, and it'll really spark your interest, and that will give you a strong direction to go into, but for a lot of people, it can be really difficult to figure out, and I think talking to people who have experience is probably just the best way to go about it, even though that's not a perfect solution, and it does require an investment of time and energy and social skills. Another reader asks, from your experience, do you feel that law school is more collaborative or competitive? I don't know about other law schools. I don't personally find Stanford to be very competitive in the sense that the culture of the law school emphasizes competition. I think at other law schools, it can feel a little bit more cutthroat, but I would say that if you have to choose between the experience being labeled collaborative or the experience being labeled competitive, it is more competitive. Also because in law school, you're not going to have that many chances to work with a team of people unless you go out and make those experiences for yourself, like signing up for moot court or doing a clinic that's very collaborative. But most of the time, you're in class, you're writing your own papers, writing your own exams. Even when you speak in class, it's kind of, in my experience, directed at the professor rather than like a true dialogue among your peers in the classroom. One viewer asks, what did you do the summer after 1L? The summer after 1L, I worked for a local government, so I worked for the Santa Clara County Council, that's COUNSEL, a job that I definitely didn't know existed before coming to law school. I applied for this job because an attorney who was an alum from Stanford worked there and came to speak about it at a session that I attended, and I found her demeanor just very calm and her work very inspiring. So I was like, oh, I just want to model myself after her. I'm going to go for it. And it worked out really well. The county council is basically the in-house lawyer for the Santa Clara County government. So they cover many different departments, and we got to see, many different types of legal work and work with some amazing, very brilliant attorneys as well. One viewer asks, how much time on a daily and weekly basis do you spend outside of the classroom doing work? This is going to vary for every person and between law schools, so I'll just say me personally. I think I am fairly efficient, though not the most efficient reader in our class, pretty middle of the road there. And I probably spend during the week like 3 or 4 hours outside the classroom doing reading and a little bit of time, taking notes on the reading that I've done. And then on the weekends, I probably spend like 5 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday each. But I tend to take classes that are a little bit reading heavy because I'm interested in things like legal history, which have a little bit more reading. So yeah, that's just my experience. Some people do more and some people do less. And of course, the time that I spend reading, I'm not reading like a machine without a break. Within 3 hours, I probably spend like 25 minutes watching YouTube and like 10 minutes like drinking tea and doing other random stuff. It's a lot less now. During 1L, the fall quarter of 1L, which was my first quarter, I spent way more time. We were in class for probably 4 to 5 hours a day, which itself is like kind of brutal to me now. Then I would read for at least 6 or 7 hours in the day, maybe more. I also have a video on a typical day during 1L fall if you want to check that out. It's kind of depressing though. Finally, one reader asks, what do you like about law school and what do you dislike? That question, like most of these questions, is a very personal one, and I could probably talk about it for hours. Just very briefly, I would say the thing that I like most about law school is the opportunity that it gives me to take classes and things that I'm interested in. Right now I'm taking a very interesting class on the history of the US as an empire and its sort of political incursions into the rights of other peoples. I find that very fascinating and hopefully useful in the future. But actually, let me backtrack and say that the thing that I like most about the law school is the people that I've met. I mean, it draws together so many interesting, talented, brilliant people, and once you find your people within that group, I feel like I'm kind of set for life in that regard. The friends that I made in law school are just so brilliant, so warm, so kind, and are going to do such great things in the world that I count myself really, really lucky to have been here to meet them. My least favorite thing about law school is probably the grind of the schoolwork at times, a lot of the time. It's kind of a crushing amount of work at times, but again, I guess that's good preparation for when you're actually a lawyer, because it's not like you will be very carefree when you're a lawyer and doing legal work. The other thing that I don't love about law school is that there are just certain times, like when you're applying for a firm job after your first year, after the summer, or when you're applying for clerkships and stuff, where you have to live with a lot of uncertainty and kind of make decisions based on not that much information and very far in the future. So after I go through the clerkship application process, I'm planning on making a video about that. So there's a lot that I don't know about that process now, but in general, it's just you make a lot of momentous decisions in law school, and you don't always have time to hedge all of your bets or consider everything before you make those decisions. And that is something that doesn't sit well with my personality and my preferred way of doing things, but it is a part of the law school experience. that's basically it for our Q&A session. There were some other great questions that I just don't have time to delve into right now, but I definitely want to do another one of these, so be on the lookout. You can follow me on Instagram at fortheTimeBeing_. That link is also in the channel profile. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so and let me know what kind of law school or lawyerly or other content that you would like to see on the channel moving forward. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!